She wiped the counter for the fourth time that morning, even though it was already spotless. That's what she did. Whenever life felt too heavy, she cleaned. The same cracked tiles, the same squeaky stools, the same smell of burnt coffee, and the same faded jukebox that hadn't worked in years. 12 years of the same routine. 12 years of, "Yes, sir, what can I get you?" And your order will be right out. Her name was Grace Turner, and most days she felt like the world had forgotten she existed. The diner wasn't just her workplace. It had become her entire life. She opened it before sunrise and closed it long after the last customer had gone, because going home only reminded her of everything she'd lost. She wasn't always like this. There was a time when Grace dreamed of being a writer. She used to spend nights filling journals with stories, imagining her name on book covers. But life doesn't always move in straight lines. Her husband left. The bills piled up. Her mother fell ill. And dreams don't survive when reality starts screaming. So Grace put the pen down and picked up a tray instead. Every morning, she served the same regulars: truck drivers, factory workers, retirees. They knew her name, but they didn't really see her. To them, she was just the lady at the diner. They never noticed the way she forced a smile, even when her heart was breaking. They never noticed the way she stared out the window, as if waiting for something that might never come. But everything began to change on a rainy Tuesday. The bell above the diner door rang softly, and a man stepped in, soaking wet, carrying nothing but a worn-out backpack. He looked exhausted, like he'd been walking for miles. He sat at the last booth near the window, quietly without looking up. Grace walked over. "Cold morning, huh?" she said with a small smile. He nodded. "Colder than I expected. What can I get you?" He hesitated. Just coffee, please." Grace noticed how he spoke, as if even asking for that was too much. She poured him a fresh cup, even though she knew he couldn't afford anything else. She could see it in his eyes, the quiet embarrassment of a man carrying too many burdens. Minutes passed. He sat there, staring at the steam rising from the cup. Grace felt a strange pull to check on him again. "Everything all right?" she asked softly. He looked up, surprised anyone even cared. Yeah, just passing through." But there was something else, something unsaid. An hour passed, then 2. His coffee grew cold, and still he didn't move. Grace noticed him scribbling something on a small notepad, sometimes sighing, sometimes staring outside as if the sky had answers he couldn't find. Finally, she walked over again. "That's a lot of thinking for one cup of coffee," she joked gently. He laughed for the first time. "Quiet, tired, but real. Yeah, I guess I've been doing a lot of that lately." Grace didn't push. People rarely talk when pushed. They talk when they feel safe. So she simply said, "If you need a refill, it's on the house." He nodded gratefully. Later that afternoon, a group of loud customers came in. They complained about everything: their food, the service, the weather. One of them snapped at Grace for forgetting ketchup. Even though she didn't, she apologized anyway. She always apologized. But the man in the corner noticed. He watched how she swallowed her frustration, how she held herself together, how she never let her pain spill onto anyone else. When the noisy group finally left, Grace took a deep breath and leaned on the counter. The man stood up, hesitated, then walked closer. "People shouldn't talk to you like that," he said quietly. Grace shrugged. "It comes with the job." "It shouldn't." His voice carried something heavy. Regret, maybe anger, maybe empathy. That's when Grace asked, "So, what brings you here?" For the first time, he looked like he might actually open up. "My name's Daniel," he said, "and I used to be a writer." Grace froze. A writer? She hadn't heard that word in a long time. Not since she abandoned her own dream. "What kind of writer?" she asked. "Screenplays. Short stories. Whatever paid the bills." "What happened?" Daniel took a deep breath. "Life happened. My wife passed away last year. And after that, everything fell apart. I couldn't write. I couldn't work. Eventually, I couldn't afford my apartment. Been traveling since. Trying to figure out how to start again." Grace felt her throat tighten. She knew that feeling too well. the feeling of falling and having nothing to grab onto. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded. "Me too." The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the windows like tiny fingertips. Grace stood there, unsure why she felt so connected to a stranger she'd known for only a few hours. Then Daniel asked something unexpected. "What about you? What's your story?" Grace laughed softly. "My story? I'm no one." "That's not true," he said firmly. "Everyone has a story." So Grace told him everything. About her dreams of being a writer. About how she used to stay up all night, filling notebook after notebook. About how life pushed her away from what she loved. And how she woke up one day realizing she'd been running a diner shift for 12 years and a dream for none. Daniel listened intently. "You know," he said, "some people stop dreaming because they're lazy. Others stop dreaming because life hit them too hard. But you never stop caring. That's rare." Grace looked away, her eyes stinging. Before leaving, Daniel took out the small notepad he'd been writing in. He tore a page from it and slid across the counter. "What's this?" she asked. "Something I wrote. For you." Then he smiled, gentle, warm, grateful, and walked out of the diner into the rain. Grace unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It wasn't a note. It was a story. A story about a woman who spent her life serving everyone else. A woman who forgot how to dream. A woman who didn't know she was the main character in her own story. Until someone reminded her. At the bottom, Daniel wrote, "The world needs your stories, Grace. Don't let them die inside you." Daniel, asterisk, asterisk. Grace pressed the paper to her chest. Her tears finally fell, the kind of tears that don't break you, but free you. That night, for the first time in 12 years, Grace didn't go straight to bed after her shift. She sat at her kitchen table, opened an old dusty notebook, and wrote. She wrote for hours, filling pages with the words she'd buried long ago. The next morning, she wrote again. And again. Days passed, then weeks. Her story grew and grew until one morning she finished it. She stared at the final sentence, hands shaking. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was hers. Her voice. Her heart. Her comeback. 6 months later, Grace stood in a small local bookstore. People filled the room, holding copies of her book. The book she wrote because of a stranger with kind eyes and a heavy heart. When the crowd quieted, Grace stepped up to the microphone. "This story," she said softly, "is dedicated to a man who reminded me that broken dreams can still grow. Wherever you are, thank you." She didn't know Daniel never stopped writing either. She didn't know he found a home again. She didn't know he kept her story in his backpack. But somewhere, maybe in another town, another diner, another moment, Daniel probably smiled, because he knew something Grace had just discovered. Sometimes one act of kindness doesn't just change a day, it changes a life. Forever.